What's a way that you've broken the law that you feel no remorse for? Story 1. Pirating shows that are unobtainable in any legal way. If it is not on any streaming services in my country, or any direct buy platform, I have two choices. Wait until it becomes valuable, which could literally be years, or break the law and pirate it. Ships ahoy. Story 2. I dressed like a ninja at 2 a.m. and stole a dog who was being abused from his backyard. When I got him home, he was covered in cigarettes burns and hid under the bed for 3 days. Watching him thrive and grow into a loving, trusting force of nature made the crime worth it. I had him for 8 wonderful years, and I would do it all again just to have him back for one more day. Story 3. I don't clock out for lunch until after I microwave my food and use the bathroom. Story 4. This hotel I worked at was too cheap to have maintenance at night. So during my shift, a water line blew in the kitchen and flooded the hotel, doing $100K in damage. The GM had everybody blame me, even though I wasn't trained in how to get the water off in the mechanical room. People were being ruthless to me, so I returned the favor. For the next 3 months, I peed on the ballroom carpet floor every night. No puddles, just walking sideways and peeing lil by lil along the edges of this massive ballroom. After leaving the hotel, someone told me that the room had been unrentable because parties were complaining of a bad odor. Even a bride refused to be married as she smelled it on the final walkthrough. The hotel blamed mold and had to rip up all the carpet and tear out the walls, spending $150K redoing the room. Story 5. Collected fossils in my hometown. State government passed a law saying all fossils and/or paleontological finds are the common heritage of the state and are public property or such. Fuck that noise. There are literally millions of fossils coming out of the ground every day where my family has lived for generations. And it's a poor community where the coal mines all ran out almost 100 years ago. I and the people from my hometown are not allowed to literally collect rocks and/or sell them on the internet for a few bucks here and there. The state government doesn't even have the money to research or exhibit the fossils they have in their museum collections now. Story 6. Before 2000 in Alabama, Huntsville specifically, there was no need to ever renew your license plate unless you were given a ticket for it. If you were given a ticket, just get a current year tag, which would include a $5 fine for being late renewing. The $5 fine would put your ticket in double jeopardy, so they would throw it out. Once I figured it out, I stopped renewing my tags completely. I got stopped for it like twice in 10 years, both tickets thrown out. Till doctor figured out how to game the system and only had to renew my tags twice in 10 years. Story 7. Feeding the homeless, offering them some beer, water, lighters, etc. So many canceled DoorDash orders with food they could eat. The idea that feeding the needy is illegal in places is sickening. Thankfully, the local cops are nice about it, but head to Orlando and you'll get arrested for it in places. Yeah, I know beer and lighters sounds bad, but I can tell you from knowing many of them, and even a small stint homeless due to a hurricane, that such things are often their only fun and distressors. We got TV, radio, video games, the internet, etc. They got none of that. Never gave them to a tweaker or problem person, just food and water. Important note, as it's a trope so much it has a subreddit. Homeless folks turning down food isn't choosing beggars most of the time. They have nowhere to store food safely, and food is the first thing you get usually. Everyone needs money for cell phones, clothing, shelter, etc. So don't judge too harshly if they ask for money over your leftover sandwich. Story 8. Several years ago, a former friend co-worker of mine drove across the country and stopped at a friend's farm along the way. He was given a year-old sugar glider who had been tormented by monkeys that were also at the farm, and she had no sugar glider family or friends to keep her company there either. Apparently, she hadn't gotten along with the other sugar gliders, and she didn't play well with others. He brought the sugar glider into a state where they were illegal to own, and when he pulled her out of a tiny cage, that was in the front seat of his van, street parked in DTLA, to show her to me and a friend of mine, I had a distinct feeling she would either die or end up with me. I watched her squirm in his hands trying to escape, and I remember my heart sinking. I was horrified. There was no convincing him of this bad idea. Days later, lo and behold, he asked if I could take her, and possibly return her to the farm she came from on my own way back east. He told me that she had been in a pouch around his neck, and a dog jumped up and bit the pouch and she was upset, along with a couple other stories that horrified me. I was shocked at the admission of negligence alone and was thankful she was even still alive. I took her immediately. I had no idea what I was doing. I got her set up with a massive cage, and whatever I could get to help make her comfortable, while I figured out what to do. I tried calling a wildlife reserve and a couple of veterinarians and explained the situation. They all told me to keep her or give her to another good home, and they couldn't take her. I kept her in her pouch around my neck for hours every night while I worked. One night, after a couple weeks of respecting her space and giving her daily tiny fruit platters, I put my hand up to the pouch that was hanging in her cage. She very slowly rose up out of her pouch, grabbed securely onto one of my fingers with her itty-bitty hands, and stared straight into my soul. The sustained eye contact was mesmerizing. That gaze was locked in. I was shook. After that, we became inseparable. She conversed in light clicks and cute grumbles and chitters, and the only time I really heard her angry was when I let my coworker see that she was doing well when he stopped by to pick up some equipment. The second she heard his voice, she launched herself out of her pouch and dove at the bars of the cage, at him, and made the most aggressive sound I'd ever heard her make. It was so loud and she was so mad. He recoiled and then insinuated that I did something to her to make her react that way. Neither of us had to see him again after that. She was smart as my shepherd. She responded to her name and communicated incredibly well. I was astonished at how much she learned and how utterly sweet she was. Her and my shepherd would touch noses to greet each other. It was magical. After a few years of tiny fruit platters and worms and bugs and regular vet visits and habitat upgrades, she developed a growing bump on her head. Various vet visits, second, third, and fourth opinions later, they told me she had cancer on her poor little head. They gave me medicine to give her. It progressed slowly. She lost an eye eventually, despite all the treatment I could get her, but she was still her cheerful self somehow, who still loved to hang out and run on her wheel and play. A solid year went by of her health declining and continued vet visits, and my futile attempts to do anything about it. I was wrecked. I had read their lifespan could be 10 years. I had only had her for 4. I did everything I could for her. She still clicked happily, though. Hung out, still ate her food, but towards the end she would run on her wheel much more often, like all night. I still don't understand why. I wondered if she knew she was fading and was just trying to hang on as long as she could. It's the opposite of what I would have thought the end of a life would look like under those circumstances, but WTF do I know? One night she was out of her habitat after she woke up to start her day, and oddly didn't want to go in her pouch. That wasn't normal for her. She climbed straight up onto my chest and flattened herself out there like she was hugging me. I held her gently while she chittered at me quietly, in a different way I hadn't heard before, and it seemed like she had fallen asleep. Her little limbs twitched a little bit, and I turned on my phone camera video so that I could check on her, as it was difficult to really see her while looking straight down at my own chest. Almost like it was on cue, she spread her little hands and feet and tail all the way out into flying formation, as if she was gliding on the wind, somehow floating but still hugging me. I had never once seen her do this in her sleep, let alone on my chest. I continued to record it in awe and assumed she was dreaming, so I said sweet things to her and held her gently. I didn't realize it for a moment, but those were her last moments. She finally passed. I'm glad I didn't take her back to the farm with the monkeys when I could have. I'm glad I took her in and figured out how to take care of her in the best way I could instead of uprooting her once again. She was the sweetest little entity, and I learned a lot from her. I wrote her a poem after she passed. My tiny dog of brown and white, our time comes to an end. After 4 years of companionship, I've lost my small best friend. You came to me when life was dark, my little felony. Your light lit up a world of chaos marked by tragedy. A dumpster fire of a human dropped you in my lap. I didn't know you'd want to stay, but then we bonded fast. I couldn't force you back into a life you would detest. I knew the risks of keeping you, but you deserved the best. I spoiled you with fruit and worms, and happily you trained, preferring this to torture via monkeys with smooth brains. You excelled at conversation, with all your clicks and squeaks, locking eyes with sweet intentions when existence seemed so bleak. My heart broke into pieces the day your cancer arrived, but still nowhere I'd rather be than by your tiny side. The vets all gave opinions. She's the sweetest we have met. They claimed you'd leave me sooner, but you just weren't ready yet. You scrunched your nose at medicine and hid behind your tail, loving countless pear and watermelon before setting sail. I'll miss our evening hangouts, always listening for your call. Your big brothers will miss you, but I'll miss you most of all. I'm thankful that when it was time I held you close to me. My dearest little tiny dog, I pray you rest in peace. Story 9. I wouldn't say the law, technically, but there was a time during a Black Friday event where I stayed in the break room BSing with everyone for about 2.5 hours. Management didn't have a clue because they were too busy with the rush. I felt no remorse and pretty proud for getting away with it, honestly. Story 10. Honestly, I steal a lot of my groceries. BC, I'm 20, living alone and supporting myself on an income of $16/HR. I feel kind of bad and I'm scared of being caught most of the time, but I really can't afford groceries sometimes. But I only steal food. I pay for everything else and all of my non-essentials. Story 11. I broke into my best friend's house and talked him into going into treatment. I literally pulled off his screens and crawled through his window to confront him. I have never been prouder of a criminal act. He had talked me into treatment a few years before, and it was payback time. Story 12. I can't say I'm completely remorseless about it, but I picked a few sea grapes from public land and ate them. I found out that you're not supposed to do that where I am since you want the seeds to fall and grow to sustain the natural barrier those plants make. The grapes tasted good, kinda like a slightly tangy Concord grape flavor emo. But I'll definitely eat privately grown ones next time. I just need to find out where they're sold. Story 13. Pirating a textbook PDF that was required for the course and that I opened 0 times. As an econ guy, I got no utility out of them, and therefore their appropriate price was nothing. Can't count how many times I heard, now the textbook says this, but we're going to do it this way, and this is how I'll expect it on the test. Story 14. Getting patients in for exams without approval from insurance. Their care was more important to me than company policies. You can't say you're in the business of healthcare and tell people no to things they need after they've shelled out all this money. Yeah, they had to pay for it later, but they didn't care. They wanted their exams when they wanted them, and I happily obliged. Story 15. Our neighbor's puppy was being horribly abused by the father, so in the middle of the night I took the puppy and delivered him to my sister who lived over an hour's away. This had all been planned, and she gave him to a childless couple who treated him like a king. Never lost 1 oz of sleep over it. In fact, I slept better knowing that he wasn't being abused anymore. Story 16. Pirating media, video games, movies, shows, etc., that I have no legal means of acquiring. I will do it in a heartbeat without an ounce of hesitation or remorse. In fact, I'd argue that it's morally correct to pirate lost media, as the more copies out there, legitimate or otherwise, the better chance it will be preserved in some fashion or another, especially in this day and age, where media can just vanish from streaming services forever on a whim, regardless of whether you paid for it or not. Story 17. I'll give you the SparkNotes version. Job that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme laid me off, and on the very same day the office closed permanently. But I forgot my laptop inside, so I busted out a window with a big-ass rock and broke into the office to go get it. Fuck you, Rick. That severance package wasn't big enough, you fucking piece of shit. Story 18. Probably a common one. On my motorbike coming home from a Sunday solo ride, came to a wide stretch of highway where I had clear view for kilometers ahead. I cracked it open and sat on 220 kph for a short while before slowing down to the speed limit. Only a risk to myself and any first responders in the event of an accident. Story 19. Driving with expired tags, like if I have to get it smogged and it passes the sniffer test, but I have a check engine light on that won't clear, I don't care. I always pay my registration on time, but last year my car wouldn't pass smog. I still have to drive to work to make money to fix the stupid check engine light. I never even got pulled over. But I did fix the problem and got it right when I wasn't dirt-ass broke. Story 20. As a college athlete on a food plan that, by design, was only meant to allow you to eat 2/3 meals a day, I would hide food underneath other food items in my to-go box, so I could eat enough food to be full and save as many points as I could. Story 21. Pirating everything that isn't locked down. If what you produce can be copied with a simple right click, what you produce is of intrinsically little value. And don't bother with your ham-fisted moralizing. You're talking to someone who spent most of his life making the lion's share of his income as a blue-collar musician. You don't know more about its impact than I do. It is fine. Technology changes morals. That will always have collateral damage, and I'm not actually opposed to the destruction of that market. Music is vastly better the less money is involved with it. I'd rather there be 3 songs made by people who genuinely had something to play than 300 songs made by weak-minded nepo babies who have the audacity to think they're cool because daddy bought them studio time, despite a complete inability to play an instrument or sing in tune. Story 22. There was this section of access walkway behind a particular series of stores in a mall I used to work at. when it first opened, where I had the only key to because the door was blocked by a sign they'd installed, having forgotten that the door was there, one of those flat doors with no handle hitting out just a flip-up piece of metal to pull it open. I worked nearby, so sometimes I'd go there when nobody was around, no security cameras on that spot. And I'd just go sit and chill in this old construction setup area still there, and waste hours just chilling and eating snacks or reading a book. I could enter the mall after it closed and, well,